Welcome to the Marvelous Middle Age Podcast, where we are building a community of people who are in the midst of midlife, sharing our stories and learning from each other along the way. Each week, I'll have a guest join me to discuss a topic that impacts our lives and touches on some aspect of midlife. We'll discuss relationships, transitions, health and well-being, parenting, careers, and more. My goal is to encourage and support you and help you thrive as you navigate this adventure of midlife. Join me here each week for the Marvelous Middle Age Podcast. This week, we are speaking with an Enneagram Six, the Loyal Guardian. And I'm very excited today to have Ashton Knatz on the podcast. Ashton, someone I've known my entire life and her entire life, not my entire life, her entire life. And you'll find out why here in a second. But Ashton, thank you for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into all of the things Enneagram Type 6, could you just introduce yourself to the listeners, share a little about yourself and what you're up to?
Yeah, so my name's Ashton. Nicole is my aunt, so that's how we've known each other for my entire life and a good portion of her life.
Yeah.
I am 23. I graduated from the University of Iowa in May 2023 and recently just got back from Montana. I was working out in Big Sky for a little over a year in sustainability management. So that's really my passion, is sustainability and the environment and environmental advocacy.
Yeah.
So I'm currently helping out my parents with their company. I'm back at home for a few months and enjoying spending time with family and friends. Before I begin graduate studies this fall, I plan to get my master's degree in sustainability management, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds.
Me too. I am so excited for you and so proud.
Thank you so much.
You have just done such an amazing job with your education, your career, your passion for our environment and climate and all of those things. It's just, couldn't be prouder. I know your parents are very proud as well. And I'm so glad that you're here. And yes, I've known you your entire life. I was there the day you were born. Feels like it just happened. When you say you're 23, I'm like, nuh-uh.
Right.
You're not 23. That means I'm 23 years older than I was when you were born. No, I'm kidding. It's just been such a joy and a privilege to get to watch you grow up. And like I said, I'm just so proud and excited for what's to come. You've got some great things on the horizon. So very excited. Before we get into your thoughts about being an Enneagram 6, I'm going to give a brief description of the Enneagram 6, again, the Loyal Guardian. I'm going to talk about the core fear, desires, weakness, and longing, and just share some overall characteristics of Type 6s. So Type 6s, their core fear is fearing fear itself, being without support, security, or guidance, being blamed, targeted, alone, or physically abandoned. A Type 6 has the core desire for security, guidance, and support. The core weakness is anxiety, scanning the horizon of life and trying to predict and prevent negative outcomes, especially worst-case scenarios, remaining in a constant state of apprehension and worry. And then the core longing for a Type 6 is that you are safe and secure. And Type 6s, there's a couple things I want to point out about Type 6s. If you're listening and you're wondering if you might be a Type 6, first of all, Type 6s, if you have anxiety, if you're a person who's either diagnosed with anxiety or you experience anxiety, that does not mean you are a Type 6. It just means that you may have that in your background. However, Type 6s do experience some anxiety that's a little bit different than other types on the Enneagram. Type 6s also are unique on the Enneagram is that they have an internal committee chiming in from all perspectives. Type 6s seek input from people outside of themselves, from things outside of themselves to help them to trust themselves and their own decision-making abilities. That being said, type sixes also are characterized as some of the most courageous folks on the Enneagram because type sixes experience this level of anxiety, this fear, scanning the horizon for worst case scenarios, being afraid of being abandoned, yet they show up in life anyway. And that takes a lot of courage. And so I wanted to point that out because a lot of people, when they find out they're a six, they're like, oh, I'm just this person who's scared all the time or in fear all the time. And it's like, you might be experiencing some of that, but you're also showing up. You're in the world. You're still doing things. You're still out there. When I think about you moving out to Montana, I mean, wow, right? Talk about a leap of faith. And as a six, and we can get into that here in a little bit, that's huge, right? You moved out there, didn't know anybody and moved out there and took your first job post-college, first official, professional type role. And you went out there and lived by yourself. I mean, man, that takes a lot of courage. So I think it's really powerful. And so I just want to point that out about sixes because I think it's great. So to kind of back up a little bit, how did you first learn about the Enneagram and kind of what interested or fascinated you about it?
Yeah, so I first learned about the Enneagram from you and my mom. I believe it was 5 or 6 years ago. We first started learning about the Enneagram and read The Road Back to You, that book, and took the assessments and tried to figure out what types we were. And over the past few years, I've done multiple tests, repeatedly assessed myself, and I'm not very good at self-assessment. I've always struggled with it for some reason. So I would test differently, depending on the day and my circumstances. So at first, when I first took the test, I believe I tested as either a 4 or a 5. And I started taking the tests again, and sometimes I would get those types. Sometimes I'd get type 9, type 2. And in recent years, I've been landing more frequently on type 6 and reading more about the type 6 and their core desires, strengths, weaknesses. I feel like that aligns well with my personality and my desires and needs. And what's interesting, and we'll probably talk about wings in a little bit. So every Enneagram type has a wing. So a 6 can either be a wing 5 or a wing 7. I would say I fall pretty evenly between a wing 5 and a wing 7, which is funny to me because my father tested as a 5. That's his primary type. And my mom, who's also appearing on this podcast, tested as a 7. So it's kind of interesting that I have my two parents are those types and then I fall right in the middle. So I learned about it through you and my mom and have been really interested in learning more about my type and going on this journey of figuring out exactly what my type is and how to honor that type.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, I also too think it's fascinating that you're right in the middle of the 5 and the 7, and your mom is 7 and your dad's 5. Right. That is really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. And absolutely. Wings are something that I really like to talk about because they're like the flavor that kind of informs our type. If you think of your primary type as like a steak, a filet mignon, let's say, right? And your wings are like the spices. They're the additional, the salt and the pepper. Right. And they flavor your type. Some people, like you mentioned yourself, are very kind of evenly distributed between 5 and 7. Some people lean really heavily towards one wing and not so much the other. So again, it's just another layer. One of the criticisms I think the Enneagram gets sometimes is like, well, I'm this one type and that's it. And you're putting me in a box and I don't want to be in a box. And that could not be farther from the truth with the Enneagram. There's wings, right? There's those, that's the number on either side of your primary type. There's stress and growth paths. There's all these other layers that we won't get into on this podcast because we'd be here for, hours and hours, but there's a lot of layers to it. And that is what makes us each unique because we're human beings and we're all unique with different facets. And also, to your point, you were talking about testing at different types. And I think that's very common. I think a lot of people will take Enneagram tests and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I tested high at these 3 or 4 types. I don't know what my type is.
Right.
And so I think it does, one, take a lot of inner reflection and diving deeper, reading. Like you said, you looked at The Road Back to You. There's other resources, and I'll link a lot of those in the show notes for folks to pursue if they want to do that. But it does take some research sometimes. Typing, honestly, is probably the biggest hurdle. And once you are starting to kind of hone in and figure that out, it just opens up so many more possibilities with the Enneagram. So I'm glad that you've taken some time to really think about that. Cause yeah, it's important. And it also forces you to kind of look at yourself and like, okay, what really is my motivation for why I do what I do? Why do I do these things? Or why am I behaving this way or saying these things? So I think that's great.
Yeah, for sure.
So as I mentioned earlier, sixes have an inner committee that has thoughts, information, and opinions coming in from different perspectives. Sixes might seek trusted people in their lives to give them input. They might research, they might read, they might Google, they might do things to try to ensure they've got all the information so they can kind of be as prepared as possible and that sort of thing. And there's great things about that. And there's things that can feel tough about that. So do you resonate with having kind of that inner committee? And if so, how has that played out for you in different aspects of your life?
Yes, I would say I definitely resonate with having an inner committee, with having, 2 or 3 different monologues going on in my head, preparing me for different situations and trying to look at all sides of a situation. And what's interesting is I think my inner committee has voices from an Enneagram 6, but also the 5 and 7 wing, because I definitely feel like I'm being pulled in different directions sometimes when it comes to a new situation. So for example, when I was making the decision about moving out to Montana for my job, I obviously had lots of different opinions coming in from all sides. And I think the Enneagram 7 was pulling me in a direction of it'll be a fun new experience. It's something that you've never done before. It'll be very fulfilling, a great experience. And then the 5 and 6 were kind of pulling me in a direction of anxiety and worry about the situation. And what if I dislike it? And what if it doesn't work out the way that I want it to? Ultimately, I would say that Enneagram 6 kind of takes charge of that committee, in that I do have concerns about security and safety. I want to make the choice that is the most secure, will provide me with the most stability. But also, I feel that there is some optimism in that 6 voice, in that everything will work out well in the end. And generally speaking, things have worked out well for me, and that I have supports and I have stability with my family and my friends. I have a great support network that I can rely on. So that helps ease those anxieties and worries about the uncertainty.
Yeah, that is really insightful. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's a great example of the walk or the thought process that a 6 might go through when having to make such a big decision, or sometimes even small decisions too can feel like that for 6s. But that was a big decision, right? To move out to Montana, pack everything and move out there. And I loved how you framed that, because it's using the different flavors, like we talked about with the wings, and using those different inputs and evaluating all of that and saying, this is the best decision for me. I've weighed all my options. I've gotten the inputs, and this is the right thing for me to do, and being prepared. I think that is one thing. If you've got a 6 in your life, wow, are you blessed, because they come prepared, right? They're the person who has, thought through every scenario that could happen on whether you're going on a trip or you just happen to be, running errands or whatever it is.
Right.
Like they are ready. They have a plan. They've thought about things. They've done that. So I love how you characterize that around that's a really big decision for somebody to make at your age. And, thinking about, the implications of that. Like you said, what if I get out there and I don't like it? And, it's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you evaluated that and kind of used those different traits of the Enneagram to help you as you were processing through that.
Right.
A lot of people, as I mentioned, associate sixes with anxiety, but while sixes can appear this way, as I mentioned, they are the most courageous Enneagram type because they might have that self-doubt. They might have the insecurity, the fear, but they carry on. They live their lives and they put themselves out into the world. And you kind of talked about this a little bit with your move to Montana, but have you seen this play out in any other parts of your life, or do you experience feeling like, okay, I've done my thinking, I've done my research, I've done my planning, and when something, like the move to Montana works out or whatever, how does that make you feel as a six when you see that kind of playing out for yourself?
Yeah. As I've gotten older, I feel like my anxiety and worry about certain situations has not necessarily gone away or vanished entirely, but I'm able to use it in a different way. So for example, when I was younger, maybe in high school and the first couple years of college, I felt like if I had anxiety or extreme stress about a situation, it was debilitating and I couldn't carry on. Now, as an older adult, I feel like I can use my anxiety and channel it into a different way to inspire action. So I utilize my anxiety just as a way to help prepare myself and think through a situation and look at all the moving parts, but it's not debilitating anymore. It's more of a guiding force in my decision making. And I utilize that as a tool. And another way that I know that I'm a pretty strong Enneagram Six is I tend to rely on outside sources. So if my anxiety does reach a certain point where it's not manageable anymore and I start to have those feelings of insecurity and self-doubt, I will reach out to my support network and I will get the insight and opinions from my trusted ones around me. For example, the move to Montana, I obviously was having some anxiety and doubt about that decision. So I reached out to my support network. So my family, my friends, therapists, previous professors, mentors in college, all those different people to get insight from them and ask, what do you think? What do you think is the best move for me? I do rely a lot on other people, not to necessarily make decisions for me, but to help provide outside perspectives and help me weigh my options before I make a big decision like that.
Yeah. And that's smart. I think that is smart to do, especially around the bigger life decisions that we have to make. I think it's good to get perspectives from different people. And you do have a great support network of people who truly love and care about you. And when a person knows that, and I think especially when a six knows that, you can confidently rely on those people because they're going to have your best interests at heart. And I think that's great. And I think that's a really mature, informed way to make decisions. And I really appreciate you sharing about anxiety because I think a lot of us experience anxiety for different reasons. And I think acknowledging, hey, right now my anxiety is not serving me well. I need to get support. Or, oh, hey, you know what? I feel like I am using this as a way to help me make decisions. I think that's really good. And I'm really glad that you shared that. And I hope that encourages people out there that might be struggling with that, no matter what Enneagram type you are, because I think everyone can experience a certain level of anxiety depending on the season of life they're in or what they're dealing with. So let's talk about stress and growth a little bit. So an Enneagram Six, so every Enneagram type has if you look at the wheel, the Enneagram wheel, which I'll put a link in the show notes to an image of that, every Enneagram type has an arrow that points away from its number and an arrow that points towards its number. And so in stress, when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling just, stressed out and frustrated and anxious a little bit, we all go towards the unhealthy traits of another number. And so a type 6 goes towards the unhealthy traits of a type 3. And our type 3s are our achievers. They're our successful achievers. And so let me read off a few of those traits. And I want to see if you ever see yourself when you're really stressed out, overwhelmed, anxious, upset. Do you see yourself exhibiting any of these? They arrogantly believe that they alone can see all the possible scenarios. You keep busy to avoid feeling anxious. You refuse to try something new if failure is a possibility. Worry about your self-image and what others might think of you. Design your behavior to gain security and alliances with others. Use charm and a likable persona to establish support and loyalties with others. Do you ever see any of those?
Yeah, I would
out?
say I do experience that sometimes when I'm under extreme stress and anxiety. One example I can think of is when I was a junior in college, I was having some difficulties with my mental health for various reasons, and that translated into my academics when I was trying to work on coursework and prepare for tests for my degree. It just felt like I was under extreme stress coming in from a variety of different situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could see how I exhibited some signs of an unhealthy 3 in the toxic overachieving aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like if I didn't score well on a test or do well on an assignment or something like that, then it would result in complete failure and breakdown. So I got into a negative mindset of having to be perfect at everything and overachieve everything and earn perfect grades on these exams. And it just culminated in a sort of breakdown in a way that I can't really describe. So I can definitely see that playing into my life in some way.
Right. Exactly. Kind of feeling like I have to be the best and I have to I have to accomplish, perfect grades or whatever it is, perfect performance.
Right.
And that just, I think it's kind of that vicious cycle that perpetuates that stress. And what I tell people about the stress path is it serves like a rumble strip. How when you're driving and you're approaching a stoplight, you have that rumble strip. And that's what your stress path is. It's a warning to say, hey, rough times coming ahead here. You need to stop. You need to take a pause, take a breath, and acknowledge that these are some traits that you're showing. And how do you take a breath and take a beat and acknowledge that you're doing that, and how can you kind of move and redirect yourself to a healthy place? And I think for a lot of people, the stress path can be a way for them to help even kind of lock in their Enneagram type to see like, oh yeah, when I get stressed out, here are some things that I do. And it plays out for everybody in different ways, but it helps you kind of know like, oh wow, okay, I'm headed down a stressed out path. I'm overwhelmed. I'm frustrated. I'm experiencing negative feelings. And so not that we all want to do that all the time, but I think it is serving as a little warning sign that happens to us. So yeah, that's good. That's good that you acknowledge that. So on the other side of that is growth. And so in growth, 6s move towards the healthy side of a type 9. And our type 9s are our peaceful meditators or peacemakers. And so here's some healthy traits of a type 9, and tell me if you resonate with any of these. So a type 9, it says you take time to relax and enjoy moments, enabling your mind to slow down. You empathize with others and extend compassion to them. You develop secure relationships as they become more calm and stable and less reactive. You become more open and receptive to others. You become emotionally peaceful and self-possessed. You increase independence by trusting their inner guidance, so your inner guidance, and reassure and support others instead of seeking security for yourself. Do you see when you're in a really good, healthy place, like you feel like things are going pretty well and you're feeling, in a good space, do you ever see any of those things come out?
Yes, definitely. I would say as I've gotten older, my mental health and my anxiety have improved significantly, as well as my confidence in myself and my decision-making capabilities. And so I would say over the past couple years, especially with the move to Montana and that decision that I made, I have been moving in the direction of growth towards the healthy traits of a type 9. I'm thinking about when I start graduate school this fall, I'm having those worries of anxiety and self-doubt about what if I can't do this? What if it's the wrong decision for me? But I can feel the positive traits of a 9 chiming in, like you said, in that inner committee, guiding myself towards the right decision and saying, yes, like you can do this. You can trust in your own decision-making capabilities, and you have the support and security that you need to make the right decisions. And like I mentioned earlier, when I was struggling with my mental health during my junior year of college and was moving strongly towards the unhealthy traits of a 3 when I was having those issues, as I was recovering from that difficult time and trying to regain my self-confidence, I could feel the positive traits of a 9 creeping in, especially with the trusting myself and my independence, as well as the taking time to relax. Like I said earlier, I was focused on overachieving and perfectionism when I was at a low point. And then as I was moving back towards a high point, I reminded myself that it's okay to take time and relax. You don't have to earn perfect grades on every test or every assignment to be considered a high achiever. So I could definitely see myself moving in that direction.
Good. Right. And growth is something that we always just kind of keep out in front of us, that we're never going to get it right all the time, that it's something to look to keep mindful of, and to strive towards in terms of just how can I use some of these traits and characteristics of this type that I move to in growth to help me and inform my life and inform, how I'm navigating the world. And it's something that we might achieve for a while and then maybe have a little setback, and we might go back and forth. And that's why it's kind of considered a path. It's a path that we're down, and it never kind of ends, but it's just something we always work on. And I think when you were talking about increased independence, absolutely. I think the decision that you made to move and take the job in Montana, I think we gain confidence by doing.
Right.
And so you made that decision, you moved out there, you went out there and, started this new position, and your position out there was really brand new to the organization that you went to work for. So you really had to kind of build it from the ground up. And so those types of experiences are just so important to build confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that move and taking on that role, that new role, I basically had to create a new department from some moving parts that were already in place at the organization, but build it from the ground up and create something to pass on to my replacement. And that move and that position did everything for my confidence. And I had a great support system out there as well, great colleagues and mentors and friends. And that really helped with my independence and my decision making and just overall growth as a person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, we're all so proud of you and so excited for your next step as you are heading into your master's degree journey. And it'll be exciting to see where you end up with that. Ashton, I am just so appreciative of you sharing about what it's like to be a type 6. If you think you might be a type 6, I will link resources in the show notes, as well as a free assessment you can take. If you're not sure what type you are, you can check it out. But thank you, Ashton, for being on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow the show to make sure the latest episode is on your podcast feed each week. I would greatly appreciate a rating and a 5-star review on the podcast platform you're listening on. It helps others to find the show. If there are topics you'd like me to discuss on the show, please email me at themarvelousmiddleagepodcast@gmail.com or direct message me on Instagram at Nicole Stute. Thank you for listening.